Welcome back. Well, earlier on at Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, people cheered, hugged and cried as they watched news on the big screen of the confirmation that the hostages are back in Israel. Cheers broke out among the remaining crowd each time a name is mentioned. People carried a huge banner reading, "Thank you, President Trump," after the new U.S. leader claimed that he had pushed the deal over the line. The outgoing Biden administration also took credit for the agreement mediated with Qatar and Egypt. 20-year-old IDF soldier Berger, as well as two Israelis, Arbel Yehud and Gadi Moses, and 5 unnamed Thai hostages had been released for 110 Palestinian prisoners. 2 previous exchanges saw 7 hostages and over 200 prisoners freed. While today's releases have been met with celebration for Israeli families whose loved ones, both alive and dead, remain in Gaza, the painful wait continues. And the Palestinian Health Ministry in the occupied West Bank says an Israeli airstrike has killed 10 Palestinians in the northern region. The Israeli Defense Forces said it targeted a squad of armed terrorists on guidance from the Shin Bet Security Service. In contrast to Gaza, where there's an ongoing but fragile ceasefire, Israel has increased its military operations in the West Bank in the past week, particularly in and around the city of Jenin, just to the north of Tamun. Hundreds of Israeli security forces, backed by helicopters, drones and armored vehicles, have been deployed to Jenin and its refugee camp, long seen as a stronghold of Palestinian armed groups, including Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. More than 20,000 people have reportedly fled their homes in the camp, where many homes have been demolished and roads have been dug up by Israeli bulldozers. And as Israel prepares to outlaw the main UN agency for Palestinian refugees on Thursday, there are warnings that it could undermine vital aid delivery and long-term chances of peace. Israeli officials have not spelled out how they will enforce the legislation passed last year by Israel's parliament, which accused the agency of being complicit in the Hamas. But the agency has always denied the allegation. Even before 15 months of brutal war left the vast majority of the 2 million people in Gaza displaced and homeless, more were registered refugees. UNRWA camps were first set up in Gaza to house Palestinians who fled or were expelled from their land in fighting before and after the State of Israel was created in 1948. UNRWA spokesperson Jonathan Fowler says the implementation of the Israel Knesset law banning the Palestine Refugee Agency's operations constitutes a unilateral blow against multilateralism.
For international staff, our visas basically were shortened so that they would end today, which is tantamount to being evicted. So I and the remaining international colleagues who were in the compound today, we effectively took the roads, hit the road, and we came to Amman. National staff, who of course make up the majority of our staff, they are not going to be present in the compound because of the risks that they will face, including tomorrow when there's going to be demonstrations organized by various Israeli movements around the compound in East Jerusalem.
Well, more now on the humanitarian response to the ceasefire in Gaza. The World Food Programme has brought 10,130 tons of food into Gaza in the last week, more than in the first 8 days of the ceasefire than in the previous month. The agency says food entered Gaza through all available border crossings from Jordan, Israel and Egypt without incident, reaching nearly 333,000 people in the first week of the ceasefire. For the first time in several months, people in Gaza are now receiving significantly more rations. The WFP says it aims to reach 1 million people each month for the next 3 months.
I'm excited to see my room, to cleaning my home with my family. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
And the United Nations Mine Action Service, ordnance, says since the ceasefire began, humanitarian convoys are finding more items as they reach new areas which they previously could not get to. The chief of the Mine Action Program in the occupied Palestinian territories, Luke Irvin, says over the past 14 months, ordnance has encountered a range of explosive ordnance that have killed and injured civilians in Gaza and prevented humanitarian activities from taking place peacefully and safely.
Look on the screen. I can see you on the spot there.
Over the past 14 months, our teams have encountered a range of explosive ordnance, including aerial bombs, mortars, rockets, projectiles, grenades, and improvised explosive devices. These have killed and injured civilians in Gaza, and they have risked preventing humanitarian activities from taking place safely. Preliminary data collected through reports by individuals to our online public information system shows that at least 92 people have been killed or injured from explosive ordnance since October 23. We do this through a range of means, including working through local partners. Since the ceasefire came into effect, people have started returning to their homes, and humanitarian personnel can reach areas which have previously been inaccessible. Yet we have already received informal reports of civilians coming across explosive ordnance in their homes, and humanitarian convoys are finding items more and more as we reach new areas which we previously could not get to. Sharing leaflets and posters and conducting. UNMAS has focused on scaling up on our response, making sure people know how to navigate the explosive threat, particularly when returning to their homes along routes or in areas that may be contaminated. Educational and training sessions to give people the necessary. When people move into areas where they previously had left, it could be their homes, it could be other infrastructure, etc. There's a risk of explosive ordnance, unexploded bombs, etc., being in that area.
Let's get more of this. Joining us is Linda Gradstein, VOA's correspondent in Jerusalem. Linda, thank you for joining us again today.
Sure.
So what's the update on the hostages released today? 3 Israelis and 5 Thai nationals.
Yes, it was 2 separate releases. The first was Agam Berger, who was the last of the 5 female Israeli soldiers who were kidnapped from their base near Gaza. 4 of them were released on Saturday, and she was the 5th. And there were some very emotional scenes of her reuniting, of course, with her parents, and then also with her friends who she had been serving with in the army. And it was, these are young girls. She was smiling. She was, and her physical situation is apparently okay. And the other 4 young women said that they want to stay in the hospital with her. They've been together nonstop since they got out, and they've insisted that they will all be together, and it was very emotional. The second release was much more complicated because it was by Islamic Jihad. And two civilians were released. One, Gadi Moses, is 80 years old, and the other is a woman named Arbel Yahoud, and then the 5 Thai nationals as well. And they were released from the south of Gaza in Khan Yunis. And there, thousands of people came and were surrounding the car that they were in and were pushing and were jeering. It was really kind of a frightening sight. And it took hours for the Red Cross to succeed in getting them. What you're looking at now are pictures of Hostage Square in downtown Tel Aviv, which has become, and you see a big banner saying, "Thank you, President Trump." And a lot of Israelis think that this hostage release would not have gone through without President Trump.
Well, help us understand Israel's reason for delaying the release of the Palestinian prisoners.
Well, Israel said that the scenes that they saw where these 2 hostages had to kind of run a gauntlet of thousands and thousands of people, I think there was also some fear. There were a lot of armed people in that crowd that someone could open fire and maybe kill the hostages, or it was really a very tense kind of scene. This is the Agam Berger, the first woman I spoke about. So Israel said that it would delay the release of the Palestinian prisoners, the 110 Palestinian prisoners, including some who are responsible for terrorist attacks that killed dozens of Israelis, until they could be assured that these kinds of scenes wouldn't happen again. So the prisoner release was delayed for about 5 hours, but is now underway. Some of the prisoners will go to the West Bank, and the ones who were the most hardcore will apparently be exiled to Egypt or Qatar.
And this is the first phase of the ceasefire deal for 6 weeks. How long do we have left, and what can we expect in the coming days?
Well, it's now been, I think, almost 2 weeks, and there have been 3 releases. What happened today, by the way, was not, it was an extra one, kind of. It wasn't anticipated.
Yeah.
So that the hostages are actually getting released a little bit faster than the schedule calls for. Another 3 are set to be released on Saturday, and at least according to reports, one of them will be Keith Siegel, an American Israeli. He's about 75. I've interviewed his wife, and he is reportedly not in great health. There was a video released of him a few months ago, and he would be the first U.S. citizen to be released. So next week, actually, on Monday, is when the negotiations are supposed to start on the next phase, the second phase of the deal, during which all of the hostages would be released. Israel would withdraw from almost all of Gaza, and basically it's a final end of war and ceasefire. And that, of course, comes the day before Prime Minister Netanyahu will be in Washington to meet President Trump on Tuesday. He's the first foreign leader who will be meeting Trump, and obviously the hostage deal is on the agenda. President Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, is in Israel today. He met the families at the hospital, and then he went to Hostage Square, which we were looking at a little while ago, and he told the families that President Trump is committed to getting all of the hostages out of Gaza and to a final ceasefire deal.
Right. And Linda, you just spoke of the Israeli President Netanyahu going into Washington to meet with President Trump. I understand there's an ICC arrest warrant for him. Is the U.S. no longer a signatory? How is he supposed to enter American soil and not be arrested?
Well, the United States never was a signatory to the Rome Statute, so he can go to the United States without a problem. And several European countries have said that if he does go, that they will not, arrest him or anything like that. So I think it's, obviously it's very important symbolically, but I don't think you're going to have a situation where the Prime Minister of Israel is arrested. But in any case, he can freely go to the United States.
And some of those protests that we saw banners saying, "Thank you, President Trump." Obviously, President Trump is, taking credit for pushing the boundaries and pushing over the lines for the ceasefire and, of course, for the prison exchanges. Of course, the Biden administration, too, that just ended, is also claiming that it played a very big role, if not the biggest role, in all of this. So who did what, really? Who should we thank for this great situation that we're seeing at the moment?
I think it's a combination, quite honestly. I mean, this is basically the same deal that was on the table since May of 2024. You know, both sides, both Israel and Hamas, kind of hesitated to accept it. And I do think that President Trump taking office and saying that he wants this war to end and that there would be hell to pay if the hostages are not released, I think kind of gave both sides a push. So I really think that both President Biden and President Trump share credit for making this happen. And, you know, I think that for Israelis, I think they feel that for the first time since October 2023, which was, you know, so traumatic for the Israeli public, that so many people today said to me, I feel like I can start to breathe again. And there's a sense that Israeli society won't be able to recover from that trauma until all of the hostages are freed. And so to see, you know, these young girls coming home, to see this 80-year-old man coming home, he's from this kibbutz called Nir Oz, where a quarter of the residents, there are a total of 400 residents, and a quarter of them were either killed or kidnapped. And most of the hostages who are being released now have lost family members or partners. The young woman, Arbel Yehud, her partner, is still being held by Hamas. She apparently was held alone for the entire time, and the first person she met was this morning when Islamic Jihad filmed a propaganda video of Gadi Moses, who was from the same kibbutz, of him giving her a hug. And until then, apparently, she had been held completely alone in Hamas tunnels for almost all of her captivity.
Linda, thank you again.
Thank you.